There are two things that can turn a great script into a bad comic. Having either too many or not enough panels on a page, and not having the right impact you want within a panel. New comic writers do not write their panel descriptions well enough, and as a result they set themselves up for failure when it comes time to apply the art. But don't worry, because in this video I'll show you not only how to include the most important bits of information, but also how to figure out how many panels are going to be on each page. This will not only save you headaches, but it could potentially save you thousands of dollars in production costs. Oh, and as you'll see, there will be drawings in this video, but you do not need to know how to draw. Stick figures are welcome here. This is Brian. To show you how you can do this, I'm going to use a film as our script. Specifically, I'm going to use this short scene from The Dark Knight. I found a script for The Dark Knight on the interwebs, and this is what it says for this scene. But I'm not going to use that script. Instead, I'm going to write what happens, but in a bad way. A man puts on a clown mask and gets into the car. Now imagine that you wrote that line and you had that shot in your head as you wrote it. That's a big problem because the artist almost certainly doesn't have that shot in their head. So you're assuming that the artist is thinking like you, and nobody thinks like you except you. So if you were to present this line to the artist, then they'll probably draw it literally. They'll probably just draw a character getting into the car and leave out all the subtle and important bits. This undoes everything you wanted from your script for a few reasons. First, the artist may draw the character's face, which, if you know the film, you know that kind of ruins the drama at the end of this scene. Second, the artist may just draw this stage direction in one panel, which kind of ruins the suspense and build-up of the scene. It just falls a little bit flat. So instead, we're going to add some details to our script, which will help capture the things that we want our artist to do. These are the details that I think make this shot have the most impact. All I've done is create the storyboard and drawn sketches in each of the panels. Don't worry about panel size right now because we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. All we're worried about now is sketching out the key bits of information so that we don't miss any details. I added in some shots that aren't in the original film just for some variety and some options. You should give yourself some different options when you're sketching in your storyboard, such as different camera shots, especially if the scene is important. So for me, I added in a shot turning the corner and racing down the street. I also show a different angle of the character putting the mask on without showing the character's face. But what you do is up to you. You don't have to use them all. But now that we have these shots in place, we can mock them up in a comic book page to see how they'll work. And this is what I did. I think it looks totally fine, and now I know what to include within my script in order for the artist to capture that and, let's face it, do a better job. So now instead of this, my script now looks like this. I know a lot of writers like to leave the visuals up to the artist entirely, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I strongly recommend that you do this exercise and then talk to your artist about alternative ideas that they may have. Not all comic artists have creativity or filmmaking or composition as their strengths. This is especially true if you're hiring a single person to do the majority, if not all of the art, which is very, very common in indie comics. But even if you do happen to hire an experienced or very talented artist, it's still worth you doing this exercise anyway, because then the artist can build from an even stronger foundation and they can still deviate from your ideas if they feel that they've got a better one. In any case, it's better to have this than this. But all of that was kind of easy because I already had the visuals from the film to reference, right? It's harder when you have to come up with the visuals yourself, so let's do that now. I'm going to take this scene from the film, but I'm not going to reference the film at all, I'm only going to reference the script. But before I start storyboarding my ideas out, you need to be aware that word balloons need to be factored in as early as possible. So when you're planning the visuals, plan the word balloon placement at the same time. That's what these circles are. This is what the comic book page looks like when I haven't planned the visuals or the word balloon placement. It looks busy, unorganized, and difficult to follow. There are too many panels on the page and not enough room for everything to breathe. And that's what an artist will think if they see a comic script that looks something like this. So instead, we're going to take that script and we're going to do what we did before and sketch out some stick figures in a storyboard. The reason why I suggest a storyboard is so that you're not distracted by the panel size or the panel placement. It's just about getting that key information down visually. So now that I have this beautiful storyboard, I can start to pick and choose which panels I think work best. And now I have a comic page that looks more like this. But now that I can see how the comic page will play out with these 7 panels, I'm not so sure I like it. So I'm going to go back to my storyboard and think about how I can lay these panels out in a different way to have more of an impact. I want the reveal of the fake Batman to be much larger than the panel suggests here. So now I can make these panels bigger and move that panel over to the other page and make it a splash panel for that big reveal. And I think that's much better. But how you lay out your panels isn't really the point here. That's going to depend on your specific script as well as your personal tastes. The point here is that now that I've done this exercise, I know that this page is going to have between 6 and 8 panels and possibly 7 spread over 2 pages depending on what I decided. And I know it works because I've tested it and I've seen it. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video how understanding this can save you thousands of dollars in production costs, and this is why. Imagine that you don't do this. Imagine that your comic script looks like this, and that you kind of hope that the artist will figure it out for you. And maybe they will, but maybe they'll also assume that you know what you're doing and they will translate your written words quite literally as it is written on the page. And you won't know that until they've already done the work. So you pay them $100 per page and they knock out the first 5 pages for you. But when you get those pages back, you realize that the comic looks really bad and messy and disorganized and not at all like you imagined. So you could either ask the artist to redraw them for free, which would seem quite harsh because it doesn't really seem to be the artist's fault since they're just following the script that you've written. Or you could pay them to redraw them from scratch, or you could hire an entirely new artist to do it instead. Either way, you're effectively paying twice as much for those pages, something that you wouldn't have had to do if you'd figured all of this out before actually hiring the artist. And not only is that affecting your wallet, but that's affecting time, because comics take a long time to produce. And even if you're able to avoid this issue and you feel that you can trust your artist to execute on your script, it's still worth doing these exercises because then you can have an accurate panel and page count which you can factor into your art budget. And an accurate art budget is what you want to aim for. Imagine that you estimate that your comic is going to be about 50 pages long and you're budgeting for $100 per page. That's $5,000 for the artwork for your comic. But then, because you haven't planned out the script effectively and you don't have an accurate panel or page count, that comic suddenly balloons to 70, 80, maybe even 100 pages. Now all of a sudden, that $5,000 that you've set aside turns into $10,000. And now the comic is basically stopped in its tracks because you have to find more money than you anticipated. Comic writing is really difficult and it can be really overwhelming, particularly when you're new. You also don't often know these things until you've already experienced them. So a lot of them can cost you time and or money, but probably both. I've certainly paid the piper plenty of times for the mistakes I've made over the years. And that's why I'm going to be launching a cohort-based course for comic writers later this year. Or if you're watching this in the future, I've already launched it. The link is in the description if you want further information on that. I'll be able to save you time, money, or both. And if you want to know more about properly planning for your comics, then click the video on screen.